Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of IC 109 Kobe. Let them know.
You're at 109 right now.
Legends never die, peeps. So it's a beautiful Sunday in Los Angeles. I'm recording from Inglewood. So if you hear airplanes flying overhead in the background, that's because I'm in Inglewood. For those of you in Los Angeles who know what it is or what it means to be in Inglewood, then you know what it is. If you don't know, and if you'd like a crash course on what it means to be a resident in Inglewood, I would suggest watching Insecure, Issa Rae's um, program. I think it was on, well, HBO Showtime or one of those. I'm not sure. I think it's HBO. Yeah, tap in and at least watch the opening credits. Uh-oh, I have a cough coming on. Excuse me for a second. Kobe, let them know while I cough.
You're at 109 right now.
Okay, excuse me. Um, yeah, Issa Rae. If you watch Insecure, the opening credits, the pictures, the opening montage, and the like, you will see scenes from Inglewood, and there is a shot of the Forum, or today it's called the Kia Forum. The Forum is a stadium located in Inglewood, and there's a shot of an airplane flying overhead, and that's a very iconic image because planes are flying overhead all the time, right here in Inglewood. In other parts of Los Angeles, you don't get the real intense experience of having airplanes flying overhead, constantly, um, except in Inglewood. And that's because Inglewood is adjacent to or the area where the international airport is located, otherwise known as LAX, right? So that explains the airplanes. Anyhow, this is the IC 109 podcast. I'm your host, Larry Wiggs, and welcome. Um, I just got a message. Righty, my wife says she'll be ready in 10 minutes. So this podcast is only going to be about 10 minutes long. I'm going to hopefully get what I have to say out in that amount of time. And there's an airplane flying overhead as I speak. But hey, here's the thing. Serendipity, synchronicity, you know, I talk about these things. And because I see 109 is the topic, it's when I see those numbers 10 and 9 that I tell stories about them on this podcast. But I haven't experienced that really, or I don't have any, stories that I really want to tell about, moments when I encounter those numbers. Um I will say though, I do share my stories with people that I meet, and the people that I've been meeting recently are young students at a local high school where I'm a substitute teacher these days. And I've told my story. The story resonates with, and surprisingly, it's resonated with quite a few students who see numbers themselves, which is wonderful. And, it's relatable, which is great. And, there are a couple of students, one student, in fact, who helped me with a previous episode of this podcast. She's a Spanish speaker, and I asked her to help me practice my Spanish. So if you look in the archives, or if you look in a few of the episodes, two or three episodes back, there's an episode entitled Entrevista 109 or Interview 109, where that student interviews me and I try to practice my Spanish with her. Um, I'm a substitute student. So in the classroom one day, the student was in there and I thought, well, got to make use of this experience. Some students weren't working on activities for a number of reasons. Either they finished their work, their teacher hadn't left an assignment for that particular day. or whatever. Um, so rather than let the students sit on their cell phones during the period, which sadly, surprisingly, it's quite common for that to happen for a multiplicity for various reasons. That does happen. Um, I asked one of the students, I asked her to interview me. So I had my microphone and set it up. And that's the beauty of this anchor, um, podcast system. I'm able to take my cell phone with me wherever I travel. I'm getting a call now. I'm getting a call, one which I will ignore. Scammers, okay? I should put this on airplane mode. Speaking of airplanes flying overhead, I think I'll do that right now. Here I go, setting phone into airplane mode. There we go. All right, enabled. So as I was saying, if you listen to Entrevista 109, you can hear me practicing my Spanish in the classroom with the student. And that was a good opportunity for me to practice Spanish with this student. And well, I didn't really talk about 10-9 with the student. I talked about my travels more so. But that particular student, I chose her because she speaks English very well. And she has a very bright future ahead of her. So I want to say kudos to her. Now, because she understood or she knew my story and knew about my podcast, because she helped me with one of my podcast episodes, she and another student worked together to give me a gift, which I thought was awesome. They shocked me with this, because I'm just their substitute teacher. And they were like, "Hey, we're gonna hook the little dude up." So they brought in um, sort of an artist's canvas that they had. What did they do? They printed out a Hollywood a star from the Hollywood Walk of Fame. They printed out a copy of that, a color copy, and then they affixed it to this artist canvas board. And then they printed out an Oscar. Whoops, I have to cough again. Excuse me, Kobe.
You're at 109 right now.
Excuse me. And then, okay, long story short, let's skip all the details. They gave me my own Hollywood star on the Walk of Fame, and then they gave me a statue, an Oscar statue. I think during our interviews or during our conversations, I once told them maybe I want to be an actor. I just said that. I don't have any energy to put forth in that direction these days. I've lived abroad. I've been teaching English. Today I'm a substitute teacher. I mean, we are in land of Hollywood. Los Angeles is, Hollywood adjacent, but like I'm not trying to get my headshots and trying to get a manager and an agent and all this kind of stuff. I'm just being me, and I'm using the podcast, but and my YouTube page and my Instagram and whatever, and just telling these stories, right? So anyway, yeah, I want to give a shout out to my students for giving me my Oscar, giving me a star on the Walk of Fame, and they didn't put my name, but they put my podcast name IC 109 on there. Because they know what's up with their sub. They're like, yeah, okay, Mr. Wiz, we know. I see, 109. That's you. I'm like, all right, guys, thank you. You know, so that was a nice little thing. But okay, aside from my students, giving me an Oscar and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, I don't have any like really meaty stories to tell you about 10-9 moments that I've experienced, except for something that that's related to synchronicity and coincidences and all this kind of stuff. Here it is. I found myself searching for celebrities' names online, um, and then soon after doing so, I learned that they have died. So these sort of events have occurred. Yeah, just like that. Like one day I'll just say, "Hey, whatever happened to so and so? How are they doing?" Okay, just got another message there. All right. My mom says, "Okay." Yeah, I'll just search the phone, excuse me, search Google, say, "Hey, where is this person? How are they doing?" And then a day later, a week later, I get the news, or maybe even a month later, I'll get the news, "Oh, so and so is dead." I'm like, "What? I was just searching that person, you know." So anyway, that has happened in the past. I've told my wife about these instances, and in fact, one of these instances occurred this past week. So I was a little bored and I was like, well, let me turn on Denzel Washington's, or rather let me watch Walter Mosley's movie adaptation of his book, Devil in a Blue Dress. Let me watch that. Um because I like Walter Mosley's book. Shout out to Big Mike because Walter Mosley is his favorite art author. And Devil in the Blue Dress is that book that I read. It was like one of the very first books that I set out to read, and I accomplished it because for such a long time, yeah, in high school we're made to read books under, certain time constraints. Oftentimes I didn't read the books. And for a long time I got really down on myself like, "Man, you haven't read completely. You haven't read any books." And I think I practiced by reading The Old Man and the Sea, Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. It's a short book, but I knew that I needed to build my confidence and build my endurance. So I read that book first, and then I felt like, okay, I'm good. I've read a book. I've read a novel. I've done that. And then when I discovered Walter Mosley's books and I read Devil in a Blue Dress, then I was well on my way to, reading more reading more than I had previously been demanded to read. In high school, you have to keep up. So anyway, um, yeah. So I'm watching Devil in the Blue Dress. Watching the movie, and then there's the opening scene where the character, Denzel Washington's character, Easy Rollins, is at Joppy's bar, and then in walks Mr. Albright. I think that's right. I'm getting them confused. I'm thinking of Dewitt. Is his name Dewitt Albright? I just grabbed the book. It's in front of me. Let's see. Mr. Albright. You can call me Dewitt. Easy. Yeah, Mr. Albright. All right, yeah. So it's Dewitt Albright who's introduced to Easy Rawlings inside of Joppy's bar, and in the scene, Mr. Albright is played by Tom Sizemore. So as I'm watching the movie, I'm watching the movie like 3 or 4 nights ago. Excuse me. And I was like thinking to myself, dang, Tom Sizemore's, I remember hearing stories about Tom Sizemore, not doing too well. And we haven't seen him working often. And I wondered to myself, how's he doing? Dun, dun, dun. And then, what? Was it yesterday? Well, today's the 5th. So 2 days ago, I think it was the 3rd. On the 3rd, 2 days ago, Tom Sizemore died. So there I was watching this movie. I mean, albeit it is an old movie, right? And then 2 days after watching it, maybe a day or two after watching it, news comes out that the guy in the movie that I was wondering about, hey, how's that guy doing? He's dead. So that's that synchronicity. That's that. Um, I don't want to say serendipity, but those are moments where it's like, wow, that's odd, that's eerie. So what I'm going to do from now on is if I'm ever watching an older flick and I wonder, hey, I haven't seen that person in a while. I wonder how they're doing. I'm going to just write on Facebook and say, hey, how is so and so doing? And see if, I mean, sadly, and see what happens, a day or two later, or maybe even a week. Because just like that guy, uh-oh, man, my throat. Kobe, let him know.
You're at
Oh
109 right now.
my goodness. Just like that guy who well, he didn't predict, but he stated that there would be an earthquake in Turkey 3 days before it occurred. Like that's the type of thing I'm talking about with these moments where I'm like, hey, whatever happened to so and so? 3 days later, oh, they're dead. Like, yeah, that happened. Speaking of Facebook, um, on brighter news, I watched Chris Rock's comedy special, Selective Outrage, last night, as well as many other people. Um, Fabulous work, right? That's all good. I remember seeing Chris Rock at the Comedy Store. I think it was 2014 or 13, right before he did, right before he hosted the BET Awards. He was practicing his routine at the Comedy Store, and they called him up, and that was amazing, man. I was there with one of my buddies from elementary school. We were hanging out at the world famous Comedy Store on Sunset Strip. Anyhow, I learned about the show, about Chris Rock's show last night, um, because my computer was on and I got a notification that, hey, Chris Rock is performing and it's going to be live from the Comedy Store. Now, Chris Rock wasn't performing in the Comedy Store on Sunset, but he was performing in Baltimore, Maryland. And the show, I guess, for the audience on Sunset, they were going to be entertained by comedians before the show. And then they would enjoy the show. And then they were going to get some live interaction from the live, comedy colleagues, excuse me, of Chris Rock. And so, man, that would have been a wonderful event to have, witnessed, to have been at the Comedy Store last night because Arsenio Hall and JB Smoove, Dana Carvey, David Spade, and the other sister. Let me see, who was it? I'm gonna have to search her name, but she's speaking of Issa Rae, I mentioned Issa Rae at the beginning of this. I believe the Nigerian sister, who was on the panel, so to speak, at last night's Comedy Store event. I believe she's the one who worked with Issa Rae on Insecure. Let me see. I'm trying to pull it up. Yvonne Orji. I think Yvonne Orji was there last night. She has to be because I can't think of any other female Nigerian female comics as big as her. You know. So anyhow, yeah. So anyhow, I watched the show. I hope you watched it too. I enjoyed it. Everything was great. The reason why I'm making this podcast is because I wanted to make one point clear. Like Chris Rock stated that his daughter is pursuing her culinary dreams in Paris. And for me, when I heard that, it sounded to me as if, I posted about this. I said, it sounds to me as if America hasn't changed. And what I meant by that is, well, if you look at history, you'll see that there are many blacks who have had to leave America in order to experience a level of success or just a level of, freedom that they weren't afforded, you know, in America. And so, all right, just got a message there from my wife. I'm gonna have to wrap this up quickly. It's taking longer than 10 minutes. All right, but let's try to rush through this, all right, very quickly. So on my Facebook page, I wrote basically that sentiment, and I said Bessie Coleman, Eugene Bouillard, James Baldwin, and Nina Simone, among others, had to go to France to experience success that escaped them in America, right? And so I got some responses here from Steven. Steven says, I don't know the inside scoop, Larry, but could this be about going to the place with the best program? Paris for food, London for economics, Scotland for golf, Hawaii for surfing, etc. Steven's point was well taken. I get it. Maybe that's why she chose to go to Paris because, food in Paris is excellent. And Feather chimed in and said that is pretty much what she thought of. She said that was my take too, you know. And she also says that Chris Rock could afford to give his daughter that life, right? So with that said, those 2 points are well taken. However, you know, I see it as a black elite being able to escape America's treachery, right? And and then I get this other idea from Sean, who chimes in. Now, Sean is a chef himself. He's an executive chef right here in America. So he can speak to this, precisely. And he says, well, look, I would have to disagree as an executive chef because he's worked as an executive chef for many years. He says, we have three prestigious culinary schools in America, and he lists them. He says, it seems that Chris Rock's daughter is in Paris because she can afford it. Money, people. And that's what divides, Chris Rock from the average person. Money, which goes along with, America is an elitist society, you know. We're going to have to get deeper into this conversation. I only have 7 more minutes, less than 7 minutes to wrap this up, but I wanted to highlight, some of these ideas. Again, Sean continues and he says, most of the chefs you've heard of probably did not go to American culinary schools. Okay. He said, right, did I read that correctly? Most of the famous chefs you've heard of and probably didn't, not want to. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He said they didn't go to American schools. He said the best food isn't found in France. Okay. All right. So he's refuting, what Steven said. Uh-oh, another cough is coming on. Kobe, I need your assistance.
You're at 109 right now.
Man, I need something to sip on. I'm sorry for all of these interruptions. Very quickly, you guys. Yeah. So Sean says the best food is not found in France. He says that the best French food is found there, and that's a very good point. Now, if Chris Rock's daughter went to Paris to learn to make the best French food or to make good French food, well, then, kudos to her. Anyhow, Sean continues and he makes a wonderful point. He says, take a look around your town. Not many French restaurants are left. This is true. I can't really find a French restaurant in LA. He says, like in my day, coming up in LA, Uh, he says, that's because the American palate has changed. And then he goes on to say he would put less into what the wealthy and privileged do and more into what the common man does, right? So Sean makes an excellent point. Well taken. All right. Um, these are just some things to think about. But along with my comment, I mentioned the names, I mentioned the likes of Bessie Coleman, who was the first black woman to become a pilot. She had to go to France to do that. Eugene Bouillard, a war pilot, decorated. Um, he had to do that. He had to go to Paris to do that. And when Eugene Bouillard returned to America, the only job he could get was working on an elevator. Elevator doorman, or so to speak. He rode the elevators up and down all day. That was the job that he was relegated to in America. James Baldwin, same thing. He left for his sanity, for peace of mind, yeah, because he needed that. Nina Simone, but then I failed to mention Josephine Baker, the most famous of all blacks who left America, American racism. Josephine Baker stated, she said, "I once told you, dear, America is not for me." Study her life and learn all of the fascinating things that she was able to accomplish in France and for the French, especially the French military. And it will blow your mind how successful and how accomplished she was outside of America's borders. And then I completely forgot Frederick Douglass. I read his autobiography, and even Frederick Douglass traveled to Europe. Same thing, W.E.B. Du Bois. I mean, so many more names are coming to mind right now. The differences that the problems and hindrances that we found in America at, yes, radically different times. I do concede that I'm talking about the past. I'm not talking about the present, but you know, Chris Rock's comedy speaks to racism. And if racism still exists in some form or fashion, so much so that we cannot live our best lives right here in America, then I I ask the question, like, what is America good for? So these are just questions, y'all. These are just questions so that we think, deeply about things. But I'm out of time and I can't delve into this more. Anyhow, this is what I'm thinking about. Walking through Larry's mind. I'm not always thinking about 10-9, although when 10 and 9 present themselves, I do share those moments, and I'm just sharing a moment now where I'm thinking about um, America. This IC 10-9 podcast has been brought to you by International Travel. Get your passport today and see the world. I'm Larry Wiggs, and I endorse this message. Thank you.
You're at 109 right now.
Peace and blessings. Hey guys, welcome back. This is an addendum to the previously recorded podcast here at
You're at 109 right now.
So I just wanted to give you a little bit more insight. Um, the folks I referenced, Stephen, Feather, Sean, all right, they know their stuff. um, and to give you some more, let me see, some more depth of character, Stephen and I met in South Korea, where he worked for a number of years. Let's see, first he was a Peace Corps officer in Korea, and then he returned a considerable time later um, to teach in Korea once again. And so he's a blogger, a traveler, a curious being. I think curiosity is the key to life. Having a healthy curiosity, and Stephen certainly has that. With regard to his travels, recently he and his wife, Marcia, have been traveling the globe. Well, even before that, they were traveling all throughout America. And so, whenever Stephen asks a question or states, his opinion, I what is it? Appreciate and um, I value, his input because of his perspective, right? Especially after having traveled probably to all 50 states recently. Who better to ask that question of, what does America have to offer? Because certainly I have my own perspective, but when Stephen, expressed himself and showed me, hey, America has a lot to offer. And, his comment was, let me read you his response to me and me posing the question, what is America good for? Stephen says, it is easy to criticize the US. It comes with little physical consequence for most of us, most of the time. All right. I'm going to stop there for a second because isn't that true? Like we have the freedom to say whatever we want about America with, little physical consequence. So that's great. He continues, he says, but America, even without widespread free healthcare, has excellent healthcare when you can get access. All right. So he's pointing that out. Stephen continues, he says, it still has universities that students in many countries dream of studying at. Now, that's the next point of, great educations. And he's mentioning, students from other countries dream of studying at those universities. Um, but my, question when I posed it to Stephen or to anybody, what is America good for? You know, I'm talking from the perspective of someone who is American, right? Born and raised. I'm not talking about from the perspective of those students who want to learn and study at our universities. But I'm talking about the people who are born, raised, and have grown up in America. What is America good for in that sense? All right. Stephen continues, it still has university. Oh, I just read that. It has a struggling democracy, one that many other countries aspire to have, he says. It has massive scale and gorgeous topography. And he can certainly speak to that, as I mentioned, after traveling to, pretty much all of the states, a few couple of, within the last 3 years. He probably just wrapped up his American tour, maybe last year, 2022. So he can speak to that. I too have. I've been to the Grand Canyon, been to DC. Um, let's see, San Francisco, Florida. I've traveled cross country, Texas. Okay, I absolutely have missed out on a lot of the northern states. I flew through Michigan, but I don't know. There's still a lot more travel within America that I could certainly do. But Stephen has done it, so again, I value his opinion. All right. Lastly, he says, America. It has broad diversity on many levels, from Alaska to Hawaii, Maine to Florida, Utah to Rhode Island. And then the last thing is this, it has too many guns. Okay, so he's being critical of America. He says it has too many guns and the best freight rail system in the world. So he says, in other words, a lot of good stuff. Okay, again, all that said, what does that mean for the average American? I heard him, mention what would appeal. to someone from a, third world country, our universities and so forth and so on. But, right in America, what do we really have? So I just wanted to say that. Um, but again, his points are valid and are valuable, right? So thank you, Stephen, for sharing your perspective. Feather, you know, mentioned, well, Feather chimed in and she stated that she wanted to, what did she say? She said her take was that France offered something better. Wait, let me read exact. She said, Feather says, Steven, that was my take too. And that he being Chris Rock, could afford to give his daughter that life. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about Feather. Feather and I met in South Korea. We were studying Spanish at the local hotel in Korea. I know. Imagine that, a hotel offering Spanish lessons. Yeah, they had the Cervantes Institute located inside of their hotel, and so for any interested parties, we could go to the hotel maybe on a Saturday. I forgot what days it was, but we could go there and we could um, we could gamble in the casino, and then in between gambling, we can make our way to the Cervantes Institute and practice our Spanish. And I did that from time to time. I'd go play a few hands of blackjack, and then I'd go back to my Spanish lesson and back and forth. Um, I remember attending those lessons, yes, with Feather, another colleague named Philippa, and another colleague named Ted. Yep. So we did that together. I drove, actually. I drove, and Philippa and Ted rode with me. Yep. Feather had her own way of getting there. We all met up there and had classes. That was a pretty cool experience. So Sean, Sean is a relative. Um, the Without getting into too many details, I simply put, he's my brother. All right. We'll just leave it at that. Um, but he's a chef, and so he's absolutely got 2 cents to add to this conversation. Quite a valuable and nuanced perspective, right? So that is that. So the point that I'm making is, these I have international reach even right now. Well, in this particular conversation, um, the people who voiced their opinions were Americans who reside in America. But for Steven, well, he and Marsha are traveling in Europe right now. So they have the added perspective of looking at America through a lens that has also, you know, seen or inspected, Europe. So that's a valuable perspective. I'm not familiar with all of Sean's travel. He has traveled, certainly. Um, But the point I want to just make is that uh, the reach that I have, as far as this podcast, and as far as the people who participate in the conversations um, that I bring up, the topics that I bring up that lead to these conversations, they are in many different parts of the globe. So that's what's going to make this podcast interesting and certainly, worthwhile. And then the last person whom I'm mentioning right now, Seth. Seth is, I guess, a Louisiana. He's Louisianan. All right, he's from Louisiana, and I met Seth in Saudi Arabia, and Seth chimed in. He said, "I've always loved Chris Rock's comedy. It's to him, it's less biting than Chappelle, but usually even more social commentary." And then Seth says, Rock has an astuteness for social commentary like an anthropologist. So I wanted to introduce the players, the people who are sharing their opinions in this podcast. Probably should have done that before, um, but this is extemporaneous, right? Impromptu. So just roll with me. Um, Thank you for listening. This is another episode of the IC 109 podcast. I'm Larry Wiggs, your host, and we're out. Peace and blessings.
You're at 109 right now.
Hey, and this is the second addendum to the podcast. Guys, I didn't even mention, Feather's qualifications. Like, okay, so for Steven, man, Steven is an educator and world traveler. I met him in South Korea. Sean, my brother, is a chef, a culinary chef, um, and what, military veteran. Okay, and Feather, if I'm not, I'm probably wrong by the title, but I think Feather is like a biochemist, and she's I'll say decorated. So, Feather, if you're listening, I apologize for not having mentioned this earlier or sooner. And also, if I got your um, profession incorrect, I mean, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to let's look forward to future episodes where I get it right. I'll say that. All right. So at least I tried to correct my error right there. All right, guys. Again, peace and blessings.